Call 911 yourself. I don't touch strangers. That was the line that hung in my courtroom like cold smoke. I was sitting on the bench in Providence Municipal Court, looking down at a woman who acted like the world was her private hotel. I am Judge Frank Caprio, and I have heard a lot in this room. I have heard excuses, I have heard lies, I have heard regret, but I had never heard someone say it like that. Like helping a human being was messy work for other people. She was 34 years old. Her name was Celeste Ashford. She had hair that looked like it had never seen a bad day. Smooth waves, perfect shine. Her makeup was sharp. Her eyes were sharper. She wore a cream-colored coat that looked expensive, the kind that makes a soft sound when it moves. On her wrist was a big watch that caught the lights like a little spotlight. She stood there with her chin lifted, like she was doing me a favor by showing up, and right away I could feel it. The attitude, the belief that rules are for regular people, the belief that money can be used like a shield. The clerk's pen paused. Even the bailiff's shoulders tightened. Celeste looked toward the gallery and gave a small smile like she was waiting for someone to clap. Instead, there was only quiet. If you believe justice should be equal for everyone, you'll want to see what happens next. Case like this is not only about a ticket, it's about who we decide to be when no one is watching, or when we think no one important is watching. Today I was watching, and I wasn't going to look away. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The room stood, then sat. The air was still. Call the next case, I said. The clerk cleared her throat. Case 2026, TR 41827. State of Rhode Island versus Celeste Ashford. Celeste stepped forward like she was stepping onto a red carpet. I looked at the file in front of me. Good morning, Ms. Ashford. She didn't say good morning back. She said, Can we do this fast? I have a lunch reservation. I kept my voice calm. You can sit, Ms. Ashford. We'll go in order. Her eyes flicked to the chair like it insulted her. She sat anyway, crossing her legs slow like she had all the time in the world. Then I saw the other person at the table, sitting quietly with hands folded. Her name was Marisol Vega. Marisol looked tired in a way you don't fix with sleep. She was 52 years old. Her hair was pulled back with a simple clip. No jewelry, no fancy coat, just a worn navy jacket, the kind people wear when they work hard and don't complain. She held a paper folder so tight her knuckles were pale. I said, Ms. Vega, you're here as the complainant. She nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was soft, but it carried something heavy, a weight. I asked, Tell me who you are and why you're here. Marisol swallowed. I work nights cleaning offices downtown. I also take care of my father. He's sick. He needs oxygen sometimes. I watched Celeste's face. No change, no empathy, just boredom. Marisol continued. On the day this happened, my dad had a bad spell. He couldn't breathe right. I ran outside to get help. I didn't have my phone. I left it charging inside. I saw Ms. Ashford in a car, and I asked her to call 911. Celeste made a sound like a short laugh, like a scoff. Marisol looked down for a second, then back up. She told me she doesn't touch strangers. The courtroom had that quiet again, the kind where you can hear someone breathe, the kind where you can hear a chair creak. I looked at Celeste. Ms. Ashford, you're charged with failing to render aid and with reckless conduct in a public parking area. Also, a civil complaint attached about property damage. Do you understand what you're accused of? Celeste rolled her eyes. I understand that this is ridiculous. I said, Watch your tone. She leaned back. My tone is fine. I glanced at the gallery. A few people shook their heads. One older man in the back whispered, Wow, like he couldn't help it. I raised my hand slightly. This courtroom runs on respect. You can disagree, but you will be respectful. Celeste shrugged. Sure, respect. That was the first disrespect moment. It was quick, sharp, like a pin. And I knew then this case was going to climb. I said, Let's talk about the day in question. Ms. Vega says her father was having trouble breathing, and you refused to call emergency services. Is that true? Celeste's lips curled. I refused to get involved. That's not a crime. I said, maybe it is, depending on what happened next. Celeste looked at her nails. Next, nothing. She's being dramatic. Marisol's eyes filled, but she held it back, like she'd practiced holding it back for years. I asked Marisol what happened after she refused. Marisol's hands tightened on the folder. I ran to another car, but no one was there. I ran to the building lobby and screamed for the security guard. It took time. My dad, he turned blue around the lips. He was scared. I was scared. Celeste cut in. Not my problem. The words hit the room like a slap. I looked at her. Ms. Ashford, do not speak out of turn. She lifted her eyebrows. I'm just telling the truth. I nodded slowly. Then let's deal with truth. I turned toward the prosecutor, a young woman with a steady voice. Do we have evidence? The prosecutor said, Yes, Your Honor. Evidence number 1 is a parking garage access log and video time stamps that place Ms. Ashford's vehicle at the scene. We also have a record that shows her vehicle was parked in a space reserved for emergency access. Celeste sat up. That's a lie. The prosecutor continued. Her vehicle blocked a marked lane for emergency vehicles for 12 minutes. Celeste waved a hand. It was for like 2 minutes, and it's not like an ambulance showed up. Marisol whispered, almost to herself, because no one called. I felt a shift in my chest. I've been doing this a long time. I have seen fear. I have seen pride. But when I see someone who refuses to see another person as human, something in me changes. I said, Ms. Ashford, we're going to take this step by step. Celeste smirked. Step by step. Great. First confrontation. Minor disrespect. I asked, why were you parked in the emergency lane? Celeste shrugged. My driver was circling. I needed to run in for 1 minute. Do you know what it's like to have people waiting on you all day? It's exhausting. The gallery murmured. Someone made a small, choking laugh. I said, do you hear yourself? Celeste looked right at me. Yes. Do you hear yourself? This is a municipal court. This is small. I leaned forward. This court is where real people come when something real happens. Celeste's eyes flashed. Fine. Next. I nodded to the prosecutor. Evidence number 1. The prosecutor handed up a printed record and a still image. I studied it. The picture showed a sleek black SUV, shining like a mirror, sitting right across bright yellow paint that said, Emergency Access Only. The time stamp was clear. I said, Ms. Ashford, this is your vehicle? Celeste leaned in just enough. Looks like it. I asked, so you admit you were there? Celeste sighed. I never said I wasn't there. I said, all right. Then came the second confrontation, the authority challenge. The prosecutor said, Your Honor, the state also has evidence number 2, messages and call logs. Celeste laughed. Oh my God, are we doing the whole spy movie thing? This is insane. I asked, what messages? The prosecutor said, after the incident, Ms. Ashford sent a series of texts to a building employee, Mr. Denny Klein, offering money to fix it and make the cleaner shut up. Marisol's face went red with shock. Celeste snapped, he's not an employee. He's someone who does favors. I said, what kind of favors? Celeste leaned forward now. Her voice got sweet, like sugar. Judge, my husband is Nolan Ashford. Maybe you've heard of him. She paused for effect. I had heard of the name, yes. In this fictional world, Nolan Ashford was a billionaire who owned a chain of tech companies. But in my courtroom, a name is not a crown. Celeste continued. We donate to a lot of things, police charities, city events. People know us. We're helpful. I said, are you telling me that so I feel pressure? Celeste smiled. I'm telling you so you understand how this works. I let that sit for a moment. In my courtroom, it works one way. The truth. Celeste's smile thinned. Truth is flexible, I said. Not here. The prosecutor read from the texts. Message at 8:41 p.m. Tell her she misheard me. Offer her 5 grand. She'll calm down. Message at 8:43 p.m. If she keeps talking, remind her job can vanish. Marisol's mouth opened. She said that? Celeste snapped. That's out of context. I asked, what context makes it okay to threaten someone's job? Celeste's eyes hardened. It's not a threat. It's reality. Second evidence, texts and call logs. Second confrontation, influence attempt. Celeste said, Look, Judge, Frank, can I call you Frank? You seem like a reasonable guy. The gallery made a sharp noise, a few gasps. I felt my face go still. You will call me Judge. Celeste held up both hands like she was calming a child. Okay, Judge. I'm just saying, this is a misunderstanding. Ms. Vega is emotional. People like her get emotional. Marisol looked down like she had been punched. I said, People like her? Celeste shrugged. Workers. They get dramatic. They want a payout. I took a slow breath. Ms. Ashford, you are walking toward a cliff and smiling. She laughed. A cliff. Wow. Nice speech. Then came the third confrontation, the line cross, the direct insult. I asked Marisol, Did you have any proof of what Ms. Ashford said to you that day? Marisol opened her folder with shaking hands. Yes, Your Honor. My dad has a little camera in the lobby. We put it there because sometimes he falls. It records sound and video. Celeste's head snapped up. That's illegal, Marisol said. It's inside our apartment facing the door. It records the hallway sound when the door is open. That day, the door was open because I ran out. The prosecutor said, Your Honor, evidence number 3 is the audio portion from that home safety camera. Also a witness statement from the security guard who heard the same words. I nodded. Play it. A small speaker was turned on. The room leaned in without moving. First we heard a door swing. Then Marisol's voice, panicked. Please call 911. My dad can't breathe. Then Celeste's voice came through, clear, cold, like ice in a glass. Call 911 yourself. I don't touch strangers. Marisol's voice again. My phone is inside. Please. Celeste. Not my emergency, not my mess. Then a pause. Then Celeste again, and this part was worse because her tone was almost playful. If he's that sick, maybe he should have had better insurance. The speaker clicked off. No one moved. This was the moment the room changed. Not like a light switch, like a whole wall falling down. I looked at Celeste. Her face was tight, but she tried to pretend she didn't care. She said, That could be anyone's voice. The prosecutor said, The witness, security guard Paul Marin, will confirm it. Celeste snapped, I don't care what a rent-a-cop says. The security guard, a big man with tired eyes, stood up in the gallery. His jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet. He didn't need to speak yet. The audio already did. Celeste turned her head toward Marisol, and her eyes went sharp like knives. She said, You're really proud of yourself, huh? Dragging me in here because you couldn't handle your own life. Marisol's voice cracked. My father almost died. Celeste leaned forward. People die every day. The room inhaled as one. I felt my hands grip the edge of the bench. I said, Ms. Ashford. But she wasn't done. She stood up without permission. She faced the whole room like she was on a stage. And then she delivered the nuclear quote, the one that would make people's mouths drop open, the one that would change everything. I didn't become rich by saving strangers, Celeste said loud and clear. I became rich by stepping over them. Silence. 10 seconds. I counted them in my head without trying. 1, 2, 3. Celeste's words floated there like poison. 4, 5, 6. Marisol's eyes were wide, like she couldn't believe someone could say that out loud. 7, 8, 9. A baby somewhere in the back made a tiny noise, and even that sounded wrong in the stillness. 10. Then the gallery erupted. Not screaming, not chaos, but a wave of sound. Gasps. Oh my God. Did she just say that? No way. People shifting, whispering, shocked laughter, the kind that comes out when you're stunned. I felt my face change. Not anger like a fire, anger like steel. I looked at Celeste, and I could tell she expected me to blink, to move on, to treat it like just words. But words are not just words. Words tell us who a person is, and in my courtroom, who you are matters. I raised my hand. The room quieted, but it took effort, like holding back a river. Celeste smiled like she won. She didn't know she had just handed me the truth on a silver tray. I spoke slowly because I wanted every word to land. Ms. Ashford, sit down. She hesitated. The bailiff took one step forward. Celeste sat. I looked at her, and I began my reckoning. Celeste Ashford, I said. Celeste Ashford, I want you to listen to me. Celeste Ashford, I'm going to ask you questions, and I want honest answers. She rolled her eyes again. Sure. I said, when you heard a woman beg for help because her father could not breathe, what did you feel? Celeste blinked. I felt annoyed. I nodded. Annoyed, not worried, not scared, not even curious. Annoyed. I held up the paper with her text messages. Then you went home, and instead of thinking, did I do the right thing? You thought, how do I make this disappear? Celeste said, I thought, how do I protect myself? That's normal. I said, protect yourself from what? From being a decent human being. Her lips pressed together. I turned to Marisol. Ms. Vega, your father, what is his name? Marisol whispered, Hector. I nodded. Hector, a man who needs oxygen, a man who depends on his daughter. I looked back at Celeste. You told her, maybe he should have had better insurance. Do you know what insurance is? Celeste scoffed. Of course, I said. Insurance is what people pray they never need. And when they need it, they pray it covers enough. But life is expensive, and sickness is expensive. And some people work hard and still struggle. I leaned forward. You had a phone. You had time. You had power in that moment, the power to make a call. I tapped the bench lightly with my finger. And you chose pride. Celeste said, I chose boundaries. I shook my head. That's not a boundary, that's a wall. I repeated her nuclear quote back to her, word for word. You said, I didn't become rich by saving strangers. I became rich by stepping over them. Her eyes flickered. For the first time, she looked unsure. I said, do you know what you just told this court? You told every person in this room that you believe your money makes you taller than them. I paused. But money does not make you taller. It only makes your shadow bigger, and a big shadow can still hide a very small heart. Marisol's eyes filled again. The security guard stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I said, Celeste Ashford, you tried to use your husband's name like a key, like it would open a door out of responsibility. Celeste said, it should. I said, no, not in Providence Municipal Court, not in my courtroom. I let my voice soften, but only a little. I have seen people with nothing give everything. I have seen people with a few dollars share a meal. I have seen kids protect their little brothers like they're heroes. I looked at Marisol. You clean offices at night. You care for your father. You showed up here because you wanted someone to hear you. Then I looked back at Celeste. And you showed up here because you thought you could buy silence. I said her name again. Celeste Ashford. She looked up. I asked, what do you think your life would feel like if your father was gasping for air and the person with the phone said, not my mess? Celeste's throat moved. She didn't answer. I asked again, slower, what would you feel? She whispered, I don't know. I nodded. That's the problem. You don't know because you don't try. Then I sat back and I knew it was time. I said, we're going to sentencing. Celeste's eyes widened. Sentencing? For what? For not calling 911? I said, for reckless behavior, for blocking emergency access, for trying to intimidate a witness, and for disrespecting this court. Celeste started to speak. I raised my hand. No, you've spoken enough. I began in stages, so every piece was clear. First, the financial penalty. Celeste leaned back like she was already bored again. I said, a fine of $2,500 for the emergency lane violation and reckless conduct, an additional $1,500 to cover court costs and administrative costs. Her eyes narrowed. That's it? I looked at her. I'm not finished. I continued. You will also pay $3,000 directly into the Providence Community Medical Support Fund. That fund helps families get emergency supplies like oxygen tubing, portable tanks, and basic medical tools. Marisol's hand flew to her mouth. Celeste's face tightened. That's not fair. I said, fair is a father breathing. I moved to the next stage. Second, your license. Celeste sat up. Excuse me? I said, your license will be suspended for 6 months. She stood up again. You can't do that. I nodded to the bailiff with my eyes. The bailiff stepped closer, calm but ready. I said, sit down. Celeste sat, breathing fast. I continued. After 6 months, you may apply for a restricted license only if you complete all conditions. If you miss even one, you stay suspended. Then I moved to the part that matched her behavior. Third, community service. Celeste laughed, but it sounded nervous now. Community service? Like picking up trash? I said, no, not trash. People. Her face changed. No, I said, yes. I spoke clearly so there could be no confusion. You will complete 240 hours of community service. Celeste's mouth fell open. I continued. You will do it at Harbor House Senior Support Center. That was a made-up place in this fictional Providence, a center that helps older people who need basic help. I said, you will be there 3 days a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, 4 hours each day. From 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., you will assist with meal service, cleanup, and front desk greeting. Celeste whispered, greeting. I said, yes, you will look people in the eye, you will say hello, you will learn their names, you will listen when they speak. I added, you will be supervised by the director, Ms. Lorna Pike. You will sign in and sign out. The center will send a report to this court every 2 weeks. Celeste's hands clenched. You're doing this to embarrass me. I said, no, I'm doing this to teach you. I went on. Fourth, public accountability. Celeste's eyes darted. I said, you will write a handwritten apology letter to Ms. Vega and to Mr. Vega. Celeste started to protest. I held up my hand. Handwritten means with a pen, no assistant, no computer, your own words. I continued. You will also record a 60-second public service message, court approved, about calling for help in an emergency and treating people with dignity. She hissed, absolutely not. I said, you will, or you will serve time. The room went quiet again. Then I added the special condition tied to what she did with the texts. Fifth, no contact and no intimidation. I said, you will have 0 contact with Ms. Vega except through attorneys or through the court. You will not contact her job. You will not contact her building. You will not contact anyone connected to her. Celeste said, I didn't contact her job. I looked at the messages. You tried. I paused. Now, we address contempt. Celeste's head snapped up. Contempt? I said, standing without permission, speaking out of turn, trying to call me by my first name, insulting a witness, insulting this court. Celeste scoffed. This is a show. I looked at her steadily. It's not a show, it's a warning. Then she did one last thing. She muttered, loud enough for the microphone to pick it up. She said, whatever. This place smells like poor. That was it. The bailiff moved fast. Not rough, not angry, just firm. I watched the handcuffs come out. The metal clicked like a hard period at the end of a sentence. Celeste jerked back. You're handcuffing me? Are you insane? I said, no, Ms. Ashford, I'm consistent. I turned to the clerk. Hold her. Celeste's eyes went wide. Wait, I said, 5 days in custody for contempt of court. The gallery gasped again. I continued. She will be released after 5 days, and she will return for a review hearing on March 3rd, 2026. Celeste's voice went high. My husband will destroy you. I looked at her, calm. Your husband is not on trial. You are. The bailiff guided her toward the side door. As she passed Marisol, Celeste tried to lift her chin again, but her eyes were wet, not from regret, from shock, like she couldn't believe consequences were real. Marisol sat frozen, trembling. I looked at Marisol. Ms. Vega, are you okay? Marisol nodded slowly. I think so, Your Honor. I said, tell your father Hector that I hope he keeps getting stronger. Her lips quivered. Thank you. The bailiff returned. The room settled, but you could feel the heat in the air, like after lightning. Weeks passed. At the review hearing, Celeste came back looking different, not humble yet, but quieter. Her coat was still expensive, but it looked like it was wearing her now, not the other way around. I asked for the service reports. The director of Harbor House sent a letter. It said Celeste showed up. On time, every time. It said she didn't talk much at first. It said she avoided eye contact. It said she acted like she was walking through a bad dream. But then something changed. One note stood out. It said, Ms. Ashford stayed late one day to help Mr. Ramirez carry his oxygen tank to the shuttle. She asked him about his grandkids. She smiled. I looked at Celeste. Is that true? Celeste swallowed. He reminded me of my grandfather. I nodded. And what did you learn? She hesitated. I learned people aren't a mess. I let that hang for a moment. Marisol was there too, sitting with her father this time. Hector Vega was thin, but upright. He had a small oxygen tube in his nose. His eyes were bright. He looked at me and nodded once. That nod was worth more than any speech. I said, Ms. Ashford, you still have work to do. Your service continues. Your suspension continues. Your apology letter must be delivered. Your PSA must be recorded. Celeste nodded. Yes, Judge. For the first time, she didn't argue. After court, when the room emptied, I sat alone for a moment. This bench is not magic. I don't get to wave a wand and make people good. But I do get to draw a line. I do get to say, in Providence Municipal Court, dignity matters. Because when one person decides another person is below them, the whole world gets colder. And when someone chooses to help, even with one simple call, the world gets warmer. Justice is not only a punishment, sometimes it is a mirror, and today that mirror did not lie. My final thought was simple. No one is too rich to be decent, and no one is too poor to deserve respect.